She stood there, heart pounding, in a dress too humble for this ballroom, yet somehow she owned the moment. Every guest froze mid-sip. The groom's smile wavered. He had abandoned her for money, and tonight, she walks in holding the unspoken question. How did we end up here? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Claire, a woman who carried herself with quiet strength. She was the kind of wife who woke before dawn, tied her hair back, and went off to work no matter how tired her body felt. She earned little at the diner downtown, but she stretched every dollar, turning scraps into meals, and never once complained that her dresses were worn or that her shoes pinched at the heel. For Claire, love was the currency that mattered most, and she spent it freely. She believed that standing side by side, even in hardship, was enough to build a life. Her devotion was unwavering, her sacrifice invisible to most, but she never counted it as loss, only as love given in full. Opposite her was Daniel, her husband. He was sharp-minded, ambitious, restless to his core. Where she saw contentment in surviving together, he saw only a ceiling pressing down. The small apartment, with its flickering light bulb in the hallway and its peeling paint, felt like a cage he could never escape. Each bill that arrived in the mail seemed to mock him. Daniel longed for more, for status, for recognition, for wealth that could silence the shame he carried. He couldn't bear the way neighbors looked at them, as though pity were written across his forehead. He told himself he was meant for better things, even if it meant leaving behind the woman who believed in him most. Their home reflected the distance growing between them. The kitchen walls were stained with years of cooking steam. The couch springs groaned when you sat too heavily, and the cracked window let in the cold of winter. Yet Claire kept a vase of cheap daisies on the table, insisting that life still held beauty. Every night when he turned away in frustration, she reminded him softly, "We'll get through this. We always do." But in Daniel's silence, she heard the truth he could not say. He no longer believed that love alone could carry them. And so, the stage was set. A woman who thought devotion would be enough to build a future, and a man who believed money was the only key that could unlock his destiny. What neither of them knew was that the balance of their fragile world would soon be shattered. Because one phone call, one simple introduction, was about to set their marriage on fire. It began with the smallest changes. Daniel started leaving earlier in the mornings, claiming he had meetings that never appeared on his calendar. He came home late, sometimes not at all, his excuses vague, his eyes avoiding Claire's when she asked simple questions. At first, she convinced herself it was work, that maybe he was finally finding an opportunity that would ease their burdens. But then came the pressed shirts she had never seen before, the polished shoes that were too new to have been bought with their money. He looked different, sharper, almost like a stranger. Claire worked harder, as if her effort could stitch the holes forming between them. She picked up double shifts at the diner, coming home with aching feet and swollen hands. Some nights she quietly skipped dinner, pushing her portion across the table so Daniel could eat a little more. She sold her few pieces of jewelry, the ones tied to memories she cherished, just to keep the lights on. When he noticed, he didn't thank her. Instead, he seemed more resentful, as though her sacrifice only reminded him of how little they had. The truth was simple. Daniel had stepped into another world. Through a mutual acquaintance, he met a wealthy family, prominent, respected, powerful. And with them, he met Julia, their daughter, radiant and untouched by hardship. To her, Daniel painted a different portrait of himself. He wasn't married. He wasn't tied to a past of small apartments and unpaid bills. He presented himself as struggling, yes, but nobly alone, a man trying to make something of himself with nothing but ambition. It was a lie that came easily, and it was a lie Julia and her father were eager to believe. But what Daniel didn't know was that this lie would not remain hidden forever. It would not stay in the shadows of polite dinners and whispered promises. It would be dragged into the light in the most public way possible. One evening, Claire returned home to silence. On the table was a folded piece of paper, weighted down by a simple band of gold, his wedding ring. The note was short, cruel in its finality. He was gone. No explanation, no promise, only absence. Claire held the ring in her palm, its coldness sinking into her bones. She tried to cry, but no sound came, only a hollow stillness that filled the room. Weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail, its thick paper and embossed lettering so unlike the bills she usually dreaded. She opened it with trembling hands. At the top, in golden script, it read, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Daniel Jameson and Julia Thompson." The date was set just weeks after he had walked away. Claire's closest friend begged her not to go, warned her that the humiliation would be unbearable, but Claire's voice was steady when she answered, "I must. I need the truth." The hall was breathtaking, every detail drenched in wealth. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in soft light, roses lined the aisles, and a string quartet played as guests whispered behind delicate glasses of champagne. But when Claire entered, the whispers changed. Heads turned, fingers pointed. "Isn't that his ex-wife?" one guest murmured, another shaking her head in disbelief. Daniel's mother approached, her tone laced with disdain. "Don't cause a scene," she warned coldly, as if Claire's very presence was an embarrassment. But Claire said nothing, only gripped the invitation in her hand as though it were her shield. Then the music swelled. Julia, the bride, appeared in a gown that shimmered with every step, her smile wide, her innocence intact. She walked toward the altar, unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows of her own celebration. Daniel stood waiting, proud, confident, but when his eyes briefly caught Claire's, the mask faltered just for a second. Later, with a glass of champagne raised, Daniel began his speech. His words flowed smoothly, carefully chosen. "Julia saved me when no one else believed in me. She gave me hope when I was at my lowest." His voice carried over the crowd, but to Claire, each word was a dagger. Around her, whispers swirled, mocking, cruel. No wonder he left. She was never enough. Then, just as the applause began to rise, the bride's father stepped forward, lifting his hand for silence. The room stilled instantly, anticipation pressing down on every guest. His voice was steady, deliberate. "Before this marriage continues," he said, pausing to glance at Daniel, "there is something the groom has not told you." The crowd leaned in. The bride froze, and in that silence, Daniel's smile vanished. The bride's father cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the hall like a blade. "Before this marriage continues, there is something the groom has not told you." The air shifted, glasses were lowered, forks set down, and a murmur rippled across the room. Julia, radiant only moments ago, now stood frozen, her eyes darting between her father and the man at the altar. He continued, deliberate and unwavering. "Daniel was not the man he claimed to be. He was married once before. He left his wife, Claire, not because he was unloved, but because he thought money could buy him more than loyalty ever could." Gasps filled the room, whispers swelled into shock. Every face turned toward Claire, who sat silently at the back, clutching her hands tightly in her lap. Daniel's composure cracked. He stammered, his words tumbling out, desperate and hollow. I only wanted a better life. Things were hopeless. She didn't understand me." But his excuses were drowned out by the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. The bride's father turned, gesturing toward Claire. "The truth is, she carried him when no one else would, and this is how he repaid her." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their judgment heavy. Julia's face paled, her voice breaking as she looked at Daniel. "You lied to me, and to everyone here." The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. If you're still watching, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's sticking through the drama. Julia's hands trembled as she faced him. Was our entire relationship built on lies? Her voice was soft, but the question carried the weight of every broken promise. Around them, guests whispered openly, no longer hiding their disdain. The groom who once stood so tall was now shrinking under the weight of his own deception. One by one, the people who had praised him began to turn. Business associates exchanged glances, their confidence gone. The bride's father stepped forward, his words final and cold. "I built my life on trust. I cannot trust a man who runs from his past. Whatever arrangement we discussed ends here." Daniel's face drained of color. The deal, the marriage, the future he had chased, it was all unraveling before his eyes. He fell to his knees, voice trembling. "Please forgive me. I can make this right. I just wanted a chance." But the mask had fallen. There was no charm left, only desperation. At that moment, Claire's voice rose, calm and steady, cutting through the chaos. "I was never your enemy. I was your partner. You chose greed over love." Her words hung in the air, undeniable, final. The man who once walked away from her now stood exposed, stripped of every illusion he had tried to build. The silence in the hall stretched heavy until Julia finally stepped back, her wedding veil trembling as her voice broke. "I can't marry a man I don't know. I can't love a man who lies." She turned away from Daniel, her bouquet slipping from her hands onto the polished floor. Guests gasped, some shaking their heads, others whispering words of pity, not for Daniel, but for the women he had betrayed. Her father placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his voice firm yet calm. "Character is worth more than wealth. A man without honesty has nothing, no matter how much he pretends to own." His words carried across the room, a judgment as final as any gavel in court. And then, with quiet grace, Claire stood. She did not gloat, she did not linger. She walked out with dignity, her head held high, her silence louder than any accusation. For the first time in years, she was not pitied, but admired. The same crowd that once whispered against her now saw her strength. True worth isn't measured by wealth, but by integrity. Betrayal can break you, but it can also reveal your strength. What do you think? Did the ex-wife do the right thing by attending? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story struck you, hit like. It helps us reach more people, and subscribe for more powerful stories every week.